Anyway, what I was gonna say, yeah, as undead, people don't scout the Necrowagon, and as a result, they're playing it like they're gonna go against whatever you know. At a lower level, people don't realize that undead versus night elf is typically going to involve Gargs, but at a higher level, people do expect Gargs, and they will build Dryads, which, as we'll see, Dryads are not a good counter to Necrowagon. Some people are surprised by this because, after all, they have Dispel, but no, Dryads are not a good counter. They get smashed by the wagons. It really does not work. Um, if you, I think one of the biggest problems, reasons elves get smashed by Necrowagon when it happens is, and by the way, here Gargoyles harassing. The reason it happens is that they've gone Dryads expecting to face Gargs, and instead they're facing Meat Wagons, and that does not work out well at all. So, let's see. Let me take a look at my notes. Meanwhile, he's trying to expand here, and I think this is a not a good idea. It's too far in his opponent's territory. Notice that Boo this entire game has really made the bottom of the map his territory. Some players sort of consider the upper right expansion to be part of the lower right base's territory, but in this game, Boo is definitely making the whole bottom of the map his territory, especially given that he's expanded at the bottom middle location. So, I don't think it's a good idea to expand here, and Boo is really doing a good job to scout that and prevent any expansion there. Now, Apprentice Wizards just thwacking away at that Wisp, which I don't believe dies to them. No, it does not, because it comes back to kill them. But anyway, let's see. Now, notice that Boo is heading up north, and as it turns out, he's going to the Goblin Lab, and he's going to get sappers. Now, you'll notice that Bringer actually reacts to this in time, and I'm convinced that the reason he does that is because of just some good thinking. He's sending his panda out very deliberately here, and he's checking the shop, but, oh, there are the sappers, and at this point they have no chance. That one sapper is going to get picked off, and this was smart play. When he saw his opponent going up, he knew that there are basically 4 places his opponent could attack. His expansion is base, or he could be going to the shop, or to the Goblin Lab. Well, he was definitely not going to one of the bases because he hadn't showed up yet, and he hadn't been seen even, so he was going straight up the middle. That meant he was going to the shop or the lab, and it turned out he was going to the lab. He sent his panda up in between to scout. That way it would have caught anything that was coming down from the lab to his main base, and instead it caught the sappers going across to his expansion, and he was able to kill them before they did any damage. And that's a big wasted investment for Boo. So, and I think in many ways that's sort of the turning point of this game, because if Boo had gotten even one of those sappers in, it could have given him a major advantage. Killing some Moonwells, and would have let him get his Necrowagon up uninhibited. Yeah, at this point, no, he has not put up his Temple of the Damned yet. Boo is going to put up another Temple of the Damned here, and at this point he's still producing a couple of Banshees, and I'm not sure really what he was thinking at this point. Maybe one of the reasons... What you'll notice that Bringer is not scouting, and if Boo had started his Necrowagon at this point, he might have had some success with it, simply because there's still a lot of Dryads out, and a bear, which is not going to do too much. One bear is just not going to hold off Necros, especially if they have Cripple. So, Boo, again, may have missed an opportunity here to win this game. And I think it's just because I think his strategy is in a little bit of disarray. Here he's putting up a second Temple of the Damned, and at this point he's going to start producing Necros. No, still doing Banshee Adept training. I'm still not sure what he's thinking, but he's definitely on his way to Necrowagon at this point. I haven't really watched the game from Boo's point of view, so I'm not exactly sure what was going through his head at that time, but it was obviously not very organized, whatever it was. I was talking about the advantages of scouting, and I said looking at your opponent's base build is one of them. I also should mention the most important, maybe one that I think people neglect, don't even think about maybe, is that you can tell when your opponent is in their base and when they're not. And that kind of thing requires awareness not just in their base but also on the map to know where they are. And this is something that is hard work to maintain, so that's why I think a lot of players neglect it. And even pros can't do it all the time because it's just too much work. But you'll notice that there are always units in a pro game. If you just watch the mini-map of the whole game, there are always units moving across the map in various places. For example, here we have Gargoyles moving across and Heroes for Boo and an army coming down. in an amateur game, it tends to be sort of a lump where the base is, and units going out and back to the base. And that's why I think, I mean, that may be one big reason that pros play better than amateurs, is because they have constant map awareness, units moving all over the map, and they trust in their micro skills to save those units should they be under attack, and they have good reaction time that's necessary. But this allows them to know when their opponents are in their base, and that's why they can creepjack so well. Not because they're map hacking, although a lot of people think when they play against good players that they're map hacking, just because they have so much awareness. Now, at this point, Bringer, using his map awareness, sending his units to his opponent's base, knowing that he hasn't scouted in a while and he found a Necro. So, that can mean only one thing, which is Necrowagon at this point. He's going to get clearer confirmation of this as he's putting pressure on his opponent, going to force him to show his hand by defending his base with those wagons. And as we can see, there's already a wagon out over here, and I think the upgrade for the wagons has been researched. So, Boo is a little bit late in terms of he's already facing down a fairly well-established Necrowagon player. Sorry, not Boo. Bringer has already... The wagons and Necros are already out, basically. And he's going to have to act quickly if he's going to fight this off. So, one thing that he's going to do in this cleared spot, and it's always a good idea to clear a spot in the back of your base, if you have a shredder to do it. And actually, here the situation gets worse. I almost forgot to mention this. He does know for sure that his opponent is going Necrowagon, but on the other hand, his Dryads are just getting clobbered by the Meat Wagons. So that's going to mean fewer units. Not that Dryads are the greatest unit in this situation, but you need everything you can get to fight off a huge army of skeletons, and he just lost some stuff. So the first thing he does is he puts up 2 Ancient of Wind. So if you're having trouble with Necrowagon, this is what I recommend you do. You'll see how effective it is here. He puts up 2 Ancients of Wind right away. If ideally you would have scouted this a little earlier, and he did not, partly because there are so many things to think about. There's an expansion, there's a harass going on in his base, but in my games there's usually not so much going on. I usually don't have to worry about an expansion and a harass. Usually players would not be coming out with both of those at the same time, simply because it takes too much work for an amateur, I think. But there's ideally you would have scouted this earlier, maybe with a wisp. There are not so many wisps out in the field in this game, which is disappointing. I would have liked to see a game with lots of wisps, and I could say he scouted it right away, but honestly it would have been no contest, and this at least becomes interesting. Anyway, with those Ancients of Wind, which are almost up, he's going to produce Fairy Dragons, and I think he gets 4 of them. We're going to see that one of the Fairy Dragons does get picked by some Gargoyles. It doesn't matter. 4 Fairy Dragons is plenty, and a problem here for Boo is that he doesn't attack fast enough, but this, in a way, this is what you're going to be facing if you have good map awareness. You're going to be well ahead of the Necrowagon attack, and Boo is still building up his forces, so he's making his attack stronger. But at this point, from the moment you scout the Necrowagon coming, you're definitely in the driver's seat. By the way, I suppose I should say, just in case you don't know and yet you're still watching this commentary, which is unlikely, I guess, but Necrowagon is a strategy with Necromancers and Meat Wagons. The Meat Wagons contain corpses, and the Necromancers raise the corpses as skeletons. It's quite deadly, as I've discovered when I'm using it. I mean, initially I thought, okay, Necrowagon's a bad strategy, but it really does work if it's not scouted. It's very hard for anyone to deal with the 25 skeletons in their face, and it takes things down in a hurry, especially with Meat Wagons, especially against non-optimal units. An orc who doesn't go Spirit Walkers because they think they're facing undead, and I don't need Spirit Walkers, it really works. Against an elf who goes Dryads, it really works. So in a way, it's useful because it counters the main strategies. I would not use it against human. They will probably have priests, and priests just wreck the skeletons. It's not even close. So overall, useful against orc and elf. Probably most useful against orc. Given undead struggles with orc, you might want to pull something strange out of the bag. But elf does have wisps to dispel the skeletons, so, and you'll see that coming into play here. But in the end, it's not the wisps that win the game. Wisps are just a useful tool. So, preparing for Necrowagon, obviously, you'll need some sort of way to fight the Necromancers. Fairy Dragons are probably the best way at the elf's disposal. and this is very close. If Boo loses his Death Knight there, the game's probably over. You do need a Death Knight to lead the attack, or you need at least a good hero to lead the attack for Necrowagon. Often it'll be